Welcome back. In this video, we'll take a global view of depression, examining how it affects different regions around the world. Depression knows no borders. It impacts people in every corner of the globe, but how it manifests and how it's treated can vary greatly depending on where you live. So let's explore the prevalence of depression in various continents, from Africa to Asia, Europe, and the Americas. Let's start with Africa. Africa is a continent of great diversity, and this is reflected in how mental health, including depression, is viewed and managed. The prevalence of depression in Africa is often underestimated, largely due to the stigma surrounding mental health. Many people in African communities may not recognize depression as a medical condition. Instead, it is sometimes seen as a personal weakness or something to be ashamed of. However, studies show that depression rates are actually quite high across the continent. According to the World Health Organization, approximately 7% of Africa's population suffers from depression, although this figure is likely higher due to underreporting and lack of access to care. In countries like Nigeria, South Africa, and Kenya, depression is a significant concern, but it often competes with other health crises, such as infectious diseases, that take precedence in national health policy. Access to mental health care in Africa remains limited, and where treatment is available, it's often expensive or culturally inappropriate. Traditional healers are commonly sought for mental health support, which can be both a blessing and a challenge, depending on the approach. Despite these challenges, we're seeing growing awareness about depression in many African countries, particularly among younger generations and urban populations. But there's a long road ahead to ensure that all Africans who need help receive proper care. Now let's move to Europe. In Europe, depression is widely recognized as a medical condition, and access to mental health services is generally much better than in many other parts of the world. However, depression is still a serious issue. According to data from the European Alliance Against Depression, about 6% of the European population suffers from depression at any given time. Interestingly, depression rates are higher in countries in Northern Europe compared to Southern Europe. For instance, Finland, Iceland, and Sweden report some of the highest depression rates in the world. Why is this? Well, some factors may include the long, harsh winters, limited sunlight, and higher rates of social isolation. On the other hand, Southern European countries, such as Spain, Italy, and Greece, tend to have lower depression rates. Although this is not to say that mental health is not a significant concern there as well. Mental health stigma is present in Europe, but it's less pervasive than in many other parts of the world. Mental health services are relatively accessible, and the EU has introduced various policies to improve care for people with depression. However, disparities still exist, especially in more rural areas or among lower socioeconomic groups, where accessing treatment can still be a struggle. Next, let's take a look at Asia. Asia is a continent with vast cultural and economic diversity, and the prevalence of depression varies greatly depending on the country. In general, depression is more stigmatized in Asia than in Europe or the Americas. In countries like Japan, South Korea, and China, mental health issues, including depression, are often not openly discussed, and seeking treatment is seen as a sign of weakness or failure. In Japan, depression has been recognized as a significant issue, and the country has seen a rise in diagnosis, especially in younger populations. Studies show that about 4.6% of the population experiences depression at some point in their lives. South Korea also reports high rates of depression, particularly among the elderly, with social pressures, economic stress, and family expectations playing a large role in these rising numbers. On the other hand, in China, mental health awareness is still developing. While depression rates are increasing, cultural stigma surrounding mental health care remains a significant barrier. However, urban areas are seeing improvements in mental health education and care, and younger generations are more open to seeking help. In India, depression is one of the leading causes of disability. Approximately 5% of India's population is affected by depression, but the stigma is so profound that many people do not seek help. Poverty, social inequality, and limited access to mental health care further exacerbate the situation, but NGOs and government initiatives are slowly working to change this. Moving on to North America. In North America, depression is one of the most common mental health disorders. It affects about 7% of the population, with higher rates of depression seen in the United States compared to Canada. The US in particular has a large number of people struggling with depression, influenced by factors such as high levels of stress, economic instability, and the constant demands of modern life. Depression is often treated with a combination of therapy and medication in North America, and public awareness is high. However, challenges still exist, such as the high cost of healthcare, which may prevent some people from receiving treatment. Mental health professionals are in demand, but there is still a shortage of resources in certain areas, especially in rural parts of the US and Canada. One concerning trend in North America is the rising rate of suicides linked to untreated or poorly managed depression. The opioid crisis in the US has also exacerbated the issue, with many people turning to substances to self-medicate their depression. Finally, South America. Depression is a major public health concern in South American countries, such as Brazil, Argentina, and Chile. In these countries, depression is often linked to social inequality, poverty, and the pressures of urbanization. Brazil, for example, has one of the highest suicide rates in the world, and depression is a leading cause of disability in the region. Despite this, South American countries have made progress in raising awareness about mental health and providing better access to care. However, there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of reducing stigma and expanding access to treatment, especially in rural areas. Reflection questions. How do cultural differences influence how depression is perceived and treated in different regions of the world? Do you think the stigma surrounding depression is stronger in some regions than in others? Why? As you can see, depression is a global issue, but its impact and treatment vary greatly across regions. The cultural, economic, and social factors of each region influence how depression is understood, experienced, and treated. In the next video, we'll dive into the economic implications of depression, looking at its financial impact on both individuals and society. Keep it going, and I'll see you in the next one.